Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Those of you who have interacted with spirit entities, what was your story like? Please remember to like, share, hype, ask and listen for shoutouts, and subscribe.
Nothing special, but as a kid, there was a girl I would speak to in the upstairs bathroom. She stood in the doorway to the closet. It was just a random kid stuff, and she would leave before I got undressed to shower. When I got older and stopped seeing her, I figured I had an imaginary friend, although that closet always made me feel a bit weird. Years later, in mid-teens, my sister was 2 rooms over and kept waking up screaming and jumping out of bed to turn the lights on. One day she busted her nose on the dresser. She was jumping off a bunk bed to get to the lights. I asked her what was scaring her so much, and she said at first she thought it was a dream, but she was sure that it wasn't the last few times. I asked her what wasn't a dream. She told me a young girl in a white flower dress had been waking her up and telling her to be careful, and that someone was going to try and kill her. I asked her to describe this girl, and she did. Hair color, length, style, eye color, skin, rough age, dress, flowers in the dress, colors, flowers on the dress, size of the flowers on the dress, shoes, 100% exactly this girl I spent at least 4 years talking to. I had never told a soul about her in my life. Even that day I didn't share with her. I knew this girl. Long and short story, my sister ended up in an attempted kidnapping about a month later. She screamed loud enough that when people noticed, the guy ran. I lived in upstate New York in an apartment that felt odd from the very beginning. My husband started having sleep paralysis up to 3 times every night, and I became very depressed when I was home. I knew something was in that apartment, but I didn't know what to do. My husband left for 3 months because of work, and I ended up alone. One night I swear I saw a shadow leaning in the hallway trying to look at me. It was a dark shadow about 6 feet tall, and I could see the head, shoulders, and definitely the brim of a hat. As time went by, I began having sleep paralysis. During the paralysis, I could hear a man opening my apartment door, and I could hear the footsteps coming toward me. When my husband returned, he mentioned how he had the best sleep ever because he had no paralysis or nightmares. A few days later, we were watching TV while sitting on the couch, and suddenly the computer chair in the corner of the room began spinning slowly, then fast, and then stopped. As we watched this, my husband and I literally climbed backwards off of our couch in disbelief. It was undeniable at that point. Any logical explanations we had went out the window. But we weren't financially able to leave. As the nightmares continued, I found out I was pregnant. Not the spirit's baby, lol. One day, after months of no sleep and living in paranoia, I became angry, just completely over it. So I stood in my living room and yelled at whatever was in that apartment. I told it that it might have been their territory at one point, but now it was mine. That I would respect it, but it had to respect us and leave us alone. I was yelling at an empty room like a crazy person, but I can honestly say nothing ever happened after that. The apartment felt lighter and peaceful. That happened back in 08-09, and my husband and I are still in shock about it. Seen Bigfoot before. I was with my cousin at the time of it happening. He lived in the country or timber area near a small town on a reservation. We were out exploring the woods and were on our way back to his house. We came out of the woods farther from the house than we normally do. It's just an open cornfield where we walked out into. So we walked to the other side because it was more downhill. Anyways, as we were walking, and this was before I got my glasses, so my eyesight was terrible, I seen a tall black figure walking along the tree line toward where we came out of. I thought it was my cousin's older brother, so I yelled out, "Junior, where are you going?" The tall figure looked at me when I yelled but kept walking. Then my cousin tapped and said, "That's not Junior." That's when I noticed he was panicking and just looked down. And was I like, "What do you mean?" "Who is that then?" He just said, "Let's just keep walking. Once you get to this house," that's when he told us it was a Bigfoot, I yelled at. When I was 11 or 12-ish, I fell asleep sitting up, my hands at my sides, palms facing upward. I woke up and could hear my mom and brother talking loudly downstairs. I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but I recognized their voices, and then began to hear a cat meowing very distinctly. I shouted, "Mom, whose cat is that?" and got no response, when all of a sudden this white cat pushes through my door and enters. I like to refer to this cat as the cosmic cat, just because the second it entered I could feel like its power. I remember wanting to pet it, but quickly realized that I couldn't move anything from the elbows down. This didn't freak me out though, so I just smiled at the cat. It got closer, then bit me, almost like a snake strike, on my upturned left wrist. I'm left-handed. I woke up gasping and clutching my wrist. I could feel the sting of its needle-like fangs for hours after. I think this is probably like the only time I ever experienced anything closely related to sleep paralysis. But after that incident, I had a series of dreams throughout the year where I could feel physical pain in dreams. I tend to have weird-ass dreams anyway, so I would have just passed it off as being a classic weird moment, but a year later, I could still wake up on occasion feeling things from dreams, and so I told my mom about the cat dream. She looked at me all crazy, and then said that she had the same exact dream once, but she heard a snake hissing, and when it got close, it struck her on the right wrist, and that she woke up feeling it. Apparently, we both have dreams on occasions now where we feel things. I don't know if this counts as a spooky experience at all, but there. Oh, it counts. There are plenty of explanations as to why this wasn't paranormal, but I like to think it was. We used to have 3 dogs, the mom and her 2 grown pups. They all got on well, but would all get a bit grouchy when one of the others came near their food. So at meal times, we put the 3 bowls on different sides of the house. One day, out of the blue, the mom died. She was a decent age, but it was still a surprise. The next day, we put the food out as usual, and one of the remaining dogs, her daughter, kept looking behind her at an empty space, growling like there was a dog behind her. The other dog and the cats were nowhere near her. Never before or since had she done that. So while it was probably nothing, I do like to think it was Ghost Nina coming back to see her pups one last time. I don't tell this story often because it still scares the fuck out of me. It's really the only reason I believe in the supernatural at all. One night when I was around 5, I was laying awake in bed looking at a book. I looked up toward my window and saw a shadow of a humanoid creature sneak from my window into my closet. The being was about 7 feet tall. I lived in Montana at the time. The memory is 25 years old now, so the details are hard to recall. The appendages were thick. It appeared to have a short snout. There was something toward the top of the shadow that made it look like it had floppy ears like a dog. The way it moved was quick, classic tiptoe sneak, with its arms out in front of its hands hanging down. I screamed for my parents, but was too scared to leave my bed. When they came in, I told them what I saw. I grew up religious, and my dad told me it was a demon. He prayed that it would leave. On 2 separate occasions, I saw something different. It was dark, so a shadow wouldn't be visible. Instead, I saw what I've described as blue pants walking toward the closet. Finally, I take this with a skeptical grain of salt because it didn't happen to me. I was playing with a friend of mine in my room one day. She looked at the closet and became frightened. She told me that a face had appeared to her on the closet door and had said, "I'll see you again and I'll kill you." Her family moved into that house after we left. I looked her up and found that she passed away in 2012. I've tried to find others with similar experiences, but have yet to be successful. I used to have a black cat named Chocolate. He was very old, about 14. We used to cuddle up and watch TV together. I was at school when Chocolate died. My mom had to take her to the vet because she was puking blood and quite a bit. The vet said she's too old to give certain medications, and it will harm her more, so the best option would be to put her down. When I got home, my mom had to break the news to me. I was devastated, as was my favorite cat. I know that's bad to say. About 1 or 2 years later, I was laying on the couch watching TV. I felt a cat lay by me, and it felt like the same fur as chocolate. I looked, and then the feeling and cat were gone. I think that either it was my mind, or that chocolate was saying the final goodbye for me. When I was about 6, I was at my daycare, and it was nap time. I was laying on the floor, staring at the door, and it suddenly seemed to get a lot brighter right by the door. For whatever reason, I put my hand up and pointed at the door, and it opened. And then I closed my hand, and the door closed. I did this probably a dozen times before one of the daycare ladies came in and asked if I was opening and closing the door, to which I said no. After she left, I did it several more times, and I guess the lady was watching me from the hall and was genuinely freaked out and told my mom about it. We lived out in the countryside at the base of North Georgia mountains when I was growing up. I mean, getting to town or the closest grocery required a 30-minute drive at least, and there was one section of road on the way toward the highway that crossed over an old wooden bridge, followed immediately after by a set of train tracks. Well, my mom was driving my sister to her dance classes one evening in the fall after dark, and they slow down to cross the train tracks. When they see this animal emerge from the woods and cross their headlights while staring through the windshield at them the entire time it was crossing in front of them. The way my sister described it was like it was a large, thin black dog with much rounder and flatter face, but with an insanely wide mouth, opened in a smile with what looked like human teeth. As soon as it was out from in front of them, they booked it into town and told my dad, and after they got home. As far as I know, it's not been spotted again, but I honestly can't even imagine what that would have been. Unfortunately, I've had a couple. I feel like I have to specify that I'm a pretty normal bloke, and that the things I've seen or felt, even though they have been vivid and real, I still find it hard to say ghosts are 100% real. Anyway, my dad owns a pub in Wales. He had often told me that he had heard children crying in the pub when it was empty and closed. Many mystic-type people have come in for a drink and made comments that it was busy with spirits. Anyway, one day I'm at the bar. It's dead. I'm in there watching TV. In the corner of my eye, I see someone walking down the other end of the bar. I glanced my eyes back at the telly, thinking it's just a customer. In that 1 second glance, reminded myself I was the only one there. I turned my head back to look at the bar, and there was this huge man with a long black coat, top hat, and black featureless face. He moved around the corner and was gone. The next day, a guy called Stan comes in without me starting the conversation. He's telling a story about how outside his caravan last night, he saw a man in a cloak and a top hat walking through his garden. Driving home from a soccer field in North Texan suburb, not near rural land at all, I'm totally sober and it's midday. I'm with my wife. I suddenly see what I at first think is a large, skinny dog crossing the road and slow down, thinking to try and collect it in case it was lost. My wife isn't looking. It's moving fast, and I get this electric feeling in my body. Suddenly, and it jumps straight up onto the 10-foot brick wall lining the housing development. Dogs can't do that. I finally am close enough to see it, and it looks right into my eyes. It's a giant ocelot. The moment we looked at each other, felt suspended in time. The moment I opened my mouth to get my wife's attention, it slinks off the wall's other side. The moment I saw it crossing the road, till this point, lasted like 3 breathless seconds. Of course, upon realization, I freak out, adrenaline pumping, screaming, "Big cool cat," to my bewildered wife, and driving quickly into the neighborhood to see if we can find it. We did not, and she wasn't on my level about it, although she thought it was also a cool thing to see. I remember being absolutely thrilled. I was going through a somewhat tough time in my mental health and at that point in my life, so it was cool to find out later that an ocelot, in the spiritual totem sense, means a sign of regeneration. I'm doing well since then, so that's pretty neat.
Alright guys, good morning or afternoon or evening or night. Shout out time again. So again, thank you guys for listening and keeping up with the requests. So we've got a few new ones today. Let's go to it. We're supposed to say hello to Ryder and Ryder Pro. Karina Allman, thank you for the well wishes for my family. I wish the same for you and yours as well. Want to say happy birthday to Ricky Dean from Misty Black. And also a great and fruitful birthday wish to C24242. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy.
There's a photograph my grandmother showed me about 15 years ago. Her family came over from Ireland. They took a picture all gathered together outside of the first house they bought in America, in Sweet Home, Oregon. This house had a large tree in the front yard that was taller than the house. I believe the photo was taken right around the turn of the century, 1900s. Sitting on a branch of that tree, high up above the house, is a leprechaun. It's a little person, very clear and very distinct, with a pointy hat, sitting on a tree branch, looking down at the family. When I was around 8 or 9, we were playing manhunt in my family's horse pasture. It was on the side of a hill lined by trees and fence. I remember it was dusk and I was hiding behind a trio of trees that grew together, and I hear a loud rustle from up the hill. I look up to the trees and there was a huge animal jumping from tree to tree. It jumped with all 4 limbs stretched out and grabbed the next tree. It looked way too big to be a bear, so I turned and grabbed my brother who was next to me. Yes, we weren't playing that well in manhunt, but when I turned around, all we saw was the leaves and limbs falling from the trees. Never saw it again. I'm still not sure what to make of an experience I had several years ago on the fringes of a small, remote indigenous community in Kimberley in Western Australia. My wife and I were walking in the early evening at the very last of light toward a huge red rock encampment along a pretty isolated track out in town. The track had a fence running alongside it and thick native grasses about waist height on either side. Most evenings for the few months we were living there, we look a long walk until the light got low before turning around and heading back to the community. So we knew the track pretty well. We pushed on a little longer and later this particular evening and witnessed something we couldn't explain. We crossed the ridgeline, and we were looking down a low incline to a patch of thin, scraggly trees. About 10 meters from the trees was a group of very large, very dark, thick-shaped objects crossing the fence in front of us, cutting across the track. I can still remember the heavy thud of my heart instantly thumping twice as hard and the look of terror on my wife's face. The creatures were much taller than me. I'm 6'3". Were moving in a cooperative sort of way, easily moved over the fence and through the long grass, and seemed to pause only briefly, almost effortlessly, when dealing with the fence. The light was getting low. It was very hard to make out a definite outline or exact shape, but there is nothing even close to these things in the Australian bush. I couldn't tell if they noticed us, but they didn't seem at all bothered by our presence, if they did. We were able to watch very closely for several seconds as the group cleared the fence and kept going. We turned and went back the way we had come, looking over our shoulders constantly, and checked what look had seen quickly headed out. The next day we spoke to a group of elders who looked shocked when we told them the story. They spoke amongst themselves for some time, and we were given very clear instructions to stay away from that area because we had witnessed spirits crossing the land. Being pushy, white fellas, we of course pushed them for more details of some other sort of explanation, but none was given, and we were told not to go back there for a while because it's very dangerous. The elders completely believed our story. My wife is a journalist and I'm a documentary filmmaker. We're not the sort of people to make up experiences. Neither of us have shared this story previously. We were completely sober. It's a dry community. I still get chills when I think about it. I would estimate they were the length of a very large bowl, but at least twice the height. Were able to navigate the fence without any difficulty and moved in a very purposeful way. My husband and I were traveling and stopped at a hotel in New Mexico. I was pregnant at the time, so I was always getting up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. I got up and had to walk around the bed to go to the restroom, which was on the other side of the wall. As I came around the bed next to where my husband was sleeping, I saw that the hotel room door was slightly ajar, and there was a dog laying on the floor. I could clearly see the dog laying there. It was looking right at me. The dog blocked part of the light coming in through the door. I started hitting my hubby, telling him to wake up while I was making eye contact with the dog. I told him the door is open and there's a dog in the room. He jumps up, looks at the door and says, "Holy shit." He turns to find the switch to the light while I jumped back in bed. Once the light is on, he finds the door closed and locked. There was no dog there. We saw the same thing. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, and it still gives me chills today. We both know that there was a dog there.